Examiner, do you live in a house or an apartment?
Callum, actually I live on campus, in a single room in halls of residence. All first-year students are encouraged to do that as they're close to the university. Next year I plan to move into student digs in town. To live on campus, to live on the university or college grounds hall of residence, a college or university building where students live. Single room, a room for one person. Student digs, student accommodation.
Examiner, tell me about where you live.
I live with my parents in the suburbs of Madrid. We only moved in recently. In fact, we had a housewarming party just a few weeks ago. The suburbs, a residential area on the edge of towns or cities to move into, to begin to live in a property. Housewarming party, a party to celebrate moving into a new home.
Examiner, what kind of accommodation do most people live in your city?
In the city itself, the majority of people live in apartment blocks. That's what surprised me about England. Most people seem to live in terraced houses with lovely back gardens. A terraced house, a house connected on both sides by other properties. Back garden, a garden at the rear of the house.
Part 2, Style Task. Describe a house or an apartment you would like to live in. You should say what kind of accommodation it would be, where it would be, who would live there with you, and say why you would enjoy living in this place.
I think most people when answering this question would say they'd like to live in a big detached house with spacious rooms, views of the countryside, and so on. But actually my ideal home would be a lot different. I've always loved the idea of having a mobile home, a really expensive one with all the mod cons. So I could live wherever I wanted, or at least have lots of holidays and be able to take all my home comforts with me whenever I traveled. I realized this would have to be a permanent address, but the mobile home would be the accommodation I'd find it exciting to live in. I suppose once I settle down and have children, I'll want to get on the property. I'll be like everyone else, saving up to put down a deposit on a house or an apartment. I don't think my family would want to live in a mobile home. Ideal home, a perfect home, spacious room, a large room. Dream home, a home you regard as perfect. Mobile home, a home that can be moved by a vehicle or one that has its own engine. To get on the property ladder, to buy a property with the aim of buying another bigger or more expensive one later in life. Home comforts, things that make a home feel comfortable. To put down a deposit, to pay an amount of money as the first in a series of future payments. Detached house, a house that is not physically connected to another property.
Part 3, Style Questions.
Examiner, is it better to own your own home or to rent?
Anna, I think both have their advantages. Living in rented accommodation isn't necessarily a bad thing. You don't have a huge debt like you do when you take out a mortgage, but I suppose the property market offers you an investment for the future. I'm sure that's why most people prefer to own their own home. To take out a mortgage, to borrow a large amount of money, paid back over several years, in order to buy a house. Property market, the buying and selling of land or buildings. To own your own home, to have bought the property you live in. Rented accommodation, property owned by someone else and for which a person pays a fixed amount to live in.
What options are available to young couples looking for accommodation in your country?
If they want to buy their own home, it isn't easy for first-time buyers. Mortgages are hard to get, so most people live with their parents or in rented accommodation. But that can also be very expensive. You often have to pay rent in advance, and if the accommodation isn't fully furnished, you have the expense of buying furniture. To pay rent in advance, weekly or monthly rent paid at the beginning of the week or month. Fully furnished, a rented property with all furniture included. First-time buyer, someone buying a property for the first time, especially when taking out a loan, mortgage. Rented accommodation, property owned by someone else and for which a person pays a fixed amount to live in.
What are some of the pleasures involved in making a home for ourselves?
I suppose it starts with house hunting, finding your ideal home. Some people enjoy doing up an old property, giving a property that's old and tired a new lease of life. Others like making wherever they live feel like home with some home comforts. To do up a property, to repair an old building. House hunting, looking for a property to live in.